I call a member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Public Service Amendment Bill. And in doing this, I certainly read the report ahead of the game to see what the propositions were that were being included, and certainly the Public Service Amendment Bill explanatory memorandum. And I think that I would agree that there are many changes proposed within the legislation out of the report that will modernise the public sector, but also will create a sense of change and reform that is for the better of the country. The Public Service Amendment Bill makes a number of amendments to the Public Service Act of 1999 relating to the Code of Conduct for public servants and the changing values and employment principles for APS employees. The Public Service Amendment Bill is in response to the report Ahead of the Game Blueprint for the Reform of Australian Government Administration, which was released on March 2010. The proposed amendments, and I'll cite out of the forward, the proposed amendments aim to strengthen the management and leadership of the public service and to help to embed new practices and behaviours in its culture. And I think all of us in this chamber would agree that that is an absolutely necessary undertaking and task, because the public service does provide that level of advice and direction, but certainly in working with ministers, shape the policies and key strategic services, programs and the interrelatedness that exists within a federation. And to that extent, the public service fulfils its role tremendously. The report Ahead of the Game, Blueprint for Reform of the Australian Government Administration, proposes reform to the Australian public sector in 4 key areas. Firstly, forging a stronger relationship with citizens through better delivery of services and through greater involvement of citizens in their government. And if the legislation enhances that, and there is the reality that that does achieve that, then I think that our progress in implementing the legislation has significant merit. Second, strengthening the capacity of the public service to provide strategic big-picture policy and deliver advice that addresses the most difficult policy challenges of the day. Third, invest in the capability of the public service workforce through improved recruitment and training processes, greater mobility and alignment of working conditions across agencies, and a new, more consistent approach to employee performance. And within that, I would have assumed that all of the members of the Senior Executive Service would also meet those requirements, and that if you have a contract, then on merit, you would apply for your position again, and if you win the position, you would then be appointed in accordance with the normal practice that prevails. We've seen some variation to that, which is of concern, because when you have unfettered power, you give unfettered power to an individual or a small group of individuals, then we often see some practices come into play that are not conducive to the way in which merit selection processes occur within the public sector. But the report also says, fourth, introducing a stronger focus on efficiency and quality to ensure that the agencies are agile, capable and effective, backed up by measures to help them plan and improve their performance. The blueprint recommends 9 key interdependent reforms which seek to deliver better service for citizens, create more open government, enhance policy capacity, reinvigorate strategic leadership, introduce a new public service commission to drive change and provide strategic planning, clarify and align employment conditions, strengthen workforce planning and development, ensure agency agility, capability and effectiveness, and improve agency efficiency. I would have thought that our current public sector does a lot of that now. With the tweaking, though, and the one that excites me most is its responsiveness in the way in which it will engage with citizens, the private sector and relevant sectors for which they develop programs, policies and strategies that will make a difference to the lives of all Australians. And let me assure you that many constituents in all electorates will welcome these changes if they happen uniformly. But equally, let me assure you that they will be very cynical and will continue with the anger and frustration. And it is an opportunity to create an ongoing employment for senior public servants outside of their contract, guaranteeing them a continuance in employment with no significant change in salary. And the recent Ken Henry appointment reflects this to some extent, and that's where I've had constituents raise with me the golden opportunity that are given to individuals within senior executive positions and the salaries that are a continuation beyond the contract, which expires for them into new roles where appointments are often seen as political. Every Australian would love that opportunity of going into new roles without having to go through a merit selection process, because equally, people see themselves as having skills that are commensurate to the types of tasks required for the jobs that are often within the public sector. Every Australian worker knows that on the expiration of a contract, they are without a job until they find another through a process of competing on merit for a new position within an organisation. They would love the opportunity of being directly appointed to a high salaried position without going through that process. The Blueprint sets an ambitious and interlinked reform agenda that seeks to improve services and programs and policies for Australian citizens. Above all, it recognises that to be strong, the APS must make the most of the talents, energy and integrity of its people. And I would have thought the appointment processes required integrity. Required the integrity that once you finish the contract, then you should compete for a position on merit and undertake that role. All governments, and I have been in the position myself, where as a public servant you look to the whole fabric of integrity within the bureaucracies that you work. The proposed reforms therefore seek to boost and support the APS workforce and leadership and to embed new practices and behaviour into the APS culture. Don't have a problem with that. I think that has significant merit. Of concern, however, this bill will give the Prime Minister greater power to extend the employment of departmental secretaries, allowing the Prime Minister to create new positions for secretaries who have resigned or whose contracts have ended. Wouldn't that be great if we could offer the same opportunity to every Australian in the context of their workplace, where they didn't have to compete and could be given high salaried positions on a basis equal to that is proposed? The Prime Minister recently did this when Mr Ken Henry resigned from the position as Secretary of Treasury in April 2011, being appointed as a special advisor under Section 67 of the Constitution. The unattached list is also a common practice in the public sector, both at the national and state levels and territory, and at times there are people who've spent considerable time on unattached lists receiving salaries provided by the taxpayers and the battling families of Australia. And I would hope that it is not a practice that will see the transition of retired or members who are secretaries into special appointments without a merit selection process. I acknowledge that there is skills and expertise that we have to seek when we assign a task that requires outside of the square thinking. But I think there are other ways that we've done it successfully in the past, and certainly the former Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, in his 2020 forums, sought to have the views of ordinary Australians and people with jobs in particular areas and specialised knowledge in particular areas to be part of the forward thinking that he had in mind when he established the Rudd government's credentials in the period that he led government. I didn't see him appoint particular advisors to continually give him advice. Should this legislation be passed, the Prime Minister will have the power to create similar roles for any secretary who resigns or whose contract has expired. And I wonder if that would apply to somebody who reapplied for their position but didn't win it on merit and were given the opportunity of being slotted into a plum role. The Coalition does not oppose the body of the bill. At present, the Prime Minister only has the power to appoint departmental secretaries to another role if their department has been abolished or if she has terminated them from their position, both being rare occurrences in the current public sector. The changes to Section 60 will allow the Prime Minister to appoint departing departmental secretaries to new roles should they resign or when their terms of service expire and are not renewed. This has the potential to be beginning of a practice similar to the New South Wales unattached list, which applies at the chief and SES level. The other interesting thing that I was reading was the financial implications and that there would be minimal impact, although the report itself says in a number of areas reform would require an upfront investment. For example, a new funding model would be required to support the APSC's additional responsibilities, including the coordination of workforce planning and agency capability reviews. Similarly, the citizen-centred reforms, such as developing and establishing an APS-wide citizen survey, would require resourcing early on. Over the long term, however, it is anticipated that the reforms, when implemented as a package, would deliver efficiencies and a return on investment. By building capacity and improving effectiveness, several reforms will drive effectiveness and efficiency gains across the APS, such as reducing the burden of internal red tape. And all the way through, the report is embedded with some tremendous thinking around the changes that are required, but it doesn't diminish the importance of public servants. What diminishes the importance of the process is the way in which this legislation will allow the Prime Minister, it doesn't matter whether they're coalition or whether they're a Labor-led government, to make appointments outside of the normal expected behaviour that has predominantly governed the way in which appointments are made in the public sector. Deputy Speaker, I support the Coalition's proposition to amend the legislation by removing changes to Section 60 of the Public Service Act, which will allow the Prime Minister to extend the terms of departmental secretaries who have resigned or whose contracts have ended. I would not want to see, over any period of time, I support the sentiments expressed by the member for Canberra, that public servants do play a key and vital role, that their pathways and their career progression is certainly based on merit standards. It is based on a set of criteria, and they know with certainty that they have the opportunity to apply and be part of their agency or another agency. I think there are many meritorious elements of the ahead of the game, but certainly I would not and could not support a proposition that would give unfettered power to a Prime Minister to appoint whoever. Because sometimes within the public sector you don't necessarily have the particular type of knowledge or skill that is required in the shaping of a strategic direction, the detailed device in respect to legislation. And this could apply to gene technology, the specialised areas of advancing science fields. In those instances, then there is not a problem in bringing in the right people to provide the level of advice. We have used committees effectively for that range of expert advice without having to appoint retired or senior public servants, secretaries in particular, at the whim of a Prime Minister. I think it is better that we have the integrity within the public sector and that we never ever diminish that. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.